My first question to you is, how did you get here? How many of you came here with public transport? Bus? Anyone?
Well, I tried.
Did you get it?
No.
Halfway.
And then you had to switch?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Switch up.
Did any of you come with ride hailing? Uber? Anyone? Did you book a taxi? Okay, how many of you came with your private vehicle? Oh, good. And then the last one. Did any of you have to manufacture a specific vehicle just to come to this event? Right? So keep all of that in mind, because that somehow relates to the way to think about AI as a business leader, right? So there are certain things we're going to discuss in a bit that has to do with all of that. Now, when we talk about AI in a business, impacts several areas of a business, isn't it? Whether it's HR, production, finance, sales, right? It touches on all aspects of a business. So when people are thinking about using AI within their business, it's more than just the technology itself. How are you applying it to all these areas? How does it relate with your people, right? How do you deal with people's anxiety about using AI? And how do you adjust your processes to make sure that you make the most out of it? Which brings us to what I want us to cover in the next 30 minutes. At the end of the day, my goal is to have people have a little think about your business and the processes you have within your business and where AI can help. But to get there, we'll start with, how do you think about AI in the first place, right? How do you reason about AI as a business leader? By the way, how many of you here run your own business? How many of you are involved in a business? Good. So same applies. If I say business leader involved in a business, just take that to be the same for the sake of this class. So how do you think about AI and business? How do you handle staff anxiety around AI? Because people have been pitching AI as something that replaces humans. But I have a different stand on that. I believe it's something that augments human activity. And as a business leader or someone involved in a business, how do you talk about AI while dealing with this concern that people have around AI? Then the key thing with using AI within your business is, how do you view your business as a data machine? We'll touch on that very soon. And then how to identify AI opportunities. And at the end, I'll be giving away a few books which I wrote on AI adoption within business. 5 books to be precise. Now, there have been some misleading narratives around AI. One of them says to use AI in your business, you must have an AI chatbot. Another one goes to the extreme end and says you need to build an AI model. Right? And this has been bombarded on business leaders ever since AI became, a thing. Right? November 2022, ChatGPT released by OpenAI. Now, this has put business leaders in a bit of, a confusion, right? Building a model is expensive, requires a lot of work. Using an AI chatbot deprives the business of several things: control over your data, privacy, and flexibility, right? So is there a middle ground, right? And like with most things, there is. And that's what we tell business leaders, that there's a middle ground for this, AI integration. You don't need to build your own model. You don't need to give up privacy or control or flexibility. You can take existing models, run them privately within your business, and get all the advantages, right? You have control and privacy, and you have the flexibility you usually get with an AI model built from the ground up. So again, in a typical business which we work with, this may not always be the first thing they go to. You will end up having, a collection of different types of solutions within the business. But for the size of business we work with, mid-sized businesses, this is usually the best approach that they can take. So that's something for you to be aware of. The big companies want you to use large AI models in the cloud because it's to their own advantage. When you use that, you use tokens, right? You chat with it back and forth, text is going back and forth, and they charge you on those things. The more people that use them, the better for them. But that doesn't really work in the best interest of a business, right? Which we'll see very soon. Now, how does that example I talked about earlier relate to AI? Public transport, if you're using this, you have very little control, very little flexibility, and almost no privacy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good. Right? And though it's quite affordable, isn't it? Right? So it has its own advantage. If you're using ride hailing, yes, you have a little bit more control when compared to public transport, a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more privacy, even though you have to give some of your data out, right? When you book the ride, they know who you are, where they're picking you up, where you're going to, and a few other things that they can gather and put together behind, in the shadows about you. It's a bit less affordable when compared to public transport in terms of buses and so on. Now, when you move with your own vehicle, you get the most control, flexibility, and privacy, isn't it? Right? You move when you want to move, you go where you want to go. You forget something, you can just go back and get it without being charged for delaying, the taxi or something. But then compared to the others, right, you pay a little bit more for that, right? For this, you pay a little bit more to enjoy all of that. If you were to manufacture your own vehicle, you have the highest of all these three things. You decide how it looks, you decide when to create it, how many to create, right? And you can do that without any interference, from anyone. But then it's the most expensive, isn't it? Does that make sense? Good. How does that relate to the way we think about AI? If I overlay the different types of AI solutions on all of this, it starts to make sense, isn't it? If you're using an AI chatbot in your business, yes, very convenient, very easy to get started with, and relatively cheaper to use, but then you are trading off privacy, flexibility, and control. A level above that is AI automation tools, no-code, low-code automation tools, which gives you more control, more flexibility, more privacy, a little bit, more expensive, but then depending on where you're running those tools, you don't have as much control, flexibility, and privacy with AI integration. So AI integration is like your private vehicle. You take an existing model and then you deeply integrate that into your business using software for your specific processes and so on. And for those that build models, the big companies, it's exactly like manufacturing a vehicle for a specific need, right? So you can see why it's so expensive for them to do, right? It's quite expensive, but then you have the full control of what goes into it, how it behaves, and depending on how they deploy it, they have more control over, the way people interact with it. So as someone in business, as a business leader, these are the kind of ways you think about AI. It's not just, just broad AI. It's what am I trading off for what I'm getting, and how does that fit into the goals and strategy of my business? If you're a smaller business, it's easier to think about and deal with, but as the business grows, or if you're a bigger business, it becomes an issue. The clients we mainly target are, they're too small for the enterprise kind of solutions, but then they're too big for small business solutions, right? And this is what we offer to them as the go-between and what will work exactly for them. Same thing we've discussed, just a different way to view it, right? So you have the deep level AI solutions, AI integration, AI model development and fine-tuning, and then the surface level solutions, AI chatbots, and then AI automation tools that are third-party hosted, right? So this is how you think about it. They're not necessarily bad. It depends on what your situation is and what you want to get out of it. Sometimes it's always good to know, what the disadvantages are when you're getting into something than finding out after you've started, right? So this gives you a picture or a way to think about that. Now, the other thing is intelligence augmentation, dealing with staff anxiety around AI. How many of you know Klarna? Buy now, pay later. Right? Good.
Swedish company.
Sorry?
Swedish.
Yes. Right? So they're based in the EU, and you have, what they did was, with all the AI hype, they fired around 700 of their customer service employees. and put AI in there. Super cool. The founder was, on stages talking about it, But then what happened? Clients started complaining about poor quality, not getting what they wanted. And guess what they did? They had to circle back and hire those people they let go. Right? So it tells you there are things that AI is good at, and there are things that humans are good at. Part of the narrative being thrown at leaders is that AI is going to replace human beings, or workers, or staff, or employees. But if you think about it that way, then it's a lose-lose situation. As a business leader, you need to think about it as, how do you augment your human intelligence with artificial intelligence? And there are two models you can do with that. AI-led with human in the loop, where AI takes most of the heavy lifting, does most of the action. You might have heard of agentic AI, that kind of thing. But you make sure that there are controls that make sure that a human gives approval or takes decisions on some key aspects of it. The other way around is human-led with AI support. Like in the example, if you have customer support people, a call comes in or an email comes in, AI goes and pulls all the information about that customer, the transaction history, and makes it available. And possibly even listening to the call live and surfacing certain data, for the human to see. Right? That's AI doing the best part, dealing with data, and a human doing the best, relating with others. This is just one example. But if you take these models and think about it across your business, I believe businesses that would win with AI are the ones that augment human and artificial intelligence and not necessarily wipe, humans out. Now, there are situations where AI will be best to use fully, and then there are situations where humans will be best. So this gives you a spectrum to think about how to augment human and artificial intelligence. We're good? Following? Great. Now, another thing to consider as a business leader or someone involved in business is really your business is a data machine. A customer comes with a problem, they trigger something within your business, they either fill a form, make a call, then certain things happen within your business, right? Someone picks it up, passes it to the next department, they call the customer, find out what the problem is, try and solve the issue, or they buy a product, whatever it is, certain things happen within your business. And then it ends with what? A happy customer. Now, what happens in between may even involve some of your suppliers and so on. So the whole idea is your business is all about data and the movement of data. The moment someone makes a call, they're introducing data into your business and is triggering something in your business. Now, as a leader, you need to think about how that data flows and operates in your business. You don't need to be technical about it. It's just common sense, right? Even though someone said it's not so common anymore. But so at some point, you're capturing data in your business. At some point, you're interpreting data, reading and making sense of it. At some point, you're refining data. So you maybe identify the customer, and then you're pulling in their formal records or other things that is related to that particular transaction. Certain areas you're creating data, you're storing data, and you're sending data. If you think about your business today, all your processes, regardless of how complicated they are, touch on some or if not all of these particular actions, right? You're either creating data, capturing data, refining data, and so on. So this is a framework called the circuits framework that helps you think about your business in that way. Why is it important? It's one of the best ways for you to start thinking about identifying opportunities within your business. Because where AI works best is where you have bottlenecks in the process. So if you have 10 processes in your business and you find out that it's where interpreting data or refining data that is an issue, right? You have people sending you orders via email, for example, and someone has to be there to read the emails to know what to do with that order, or even if it's an order in the first place. And you have multiple processes that do a similar step. You can easily identify that, okay, we're interpreting data and it's quite poor for us there. Automatically that helps identify the pain, and you can start thinking about the best AI solution, like we talked about earlier, to apply in solving that particular pain. And if you do it right, it means you can start in a small area of your business and then expand to the other areas, knowing exactly where AI is going to help with the pain you're going through. Now, I detail this in my book, where you can see how it works, so many examples, all these things I'm talking about, you can find it in there. Now, what I want us to do as a quick exercise, a part of this workshop, all of that was like background information. I'm going to give you some worksheets for you to take a look. We'll go through it together. And for you to start thinking about how your business works, what are the processes, where are the bottlenecks, where are the pains, and where could AI start helping your business? If you look at the flip side of that particular sheet you've been given, you would see the types of AI solutions at the bottom there and where they are best applied or where the advantages are for using them. Right? So if you have writing materials, you can take the next 5 minutes to think about your business in this aspect. What we encourage business leaders to do is start by identifying where the pains are in your business. So I'll ask you, in your company right now, are there any areas where people dread that a particular type of work, that people try and avoid it because it's either, too tasking, there's a lot of workload, or it's prone to errors? Right? So if you have those kinds of things, those are areas where you can start thinking about applying AI as a solution. Right? So the idea is you list out a few of those workflows, you give it a name, give it a description, and then you ask yourself, what are the inputs into that particular process, and what are the outputs of that process, and what are the current pains you're going through for that specific process. You can list, I think, 3 or 4 in this. And then another key thing to consider is it an internal facing process or an external facing process? 95% of AI projects fail. That has been one of the recent surveys that have been done, and it points to the fact that only 5% succeed. Why is that? Now, a lot of factors. One, business leaders misunderstand AI. They think AI is smart enough to just throw it in there, it goes and understands the business, comes with the solutions, and then implements it. But it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't. So another thing is you have people applying AI in the wrong areas of their business. I've been in tech for 25 years. I've been helping people build solutions from the ground up, helping with digital transformation, speaking with business leaders, designing strategies, and then working with them to implement those strategies, for their tech. But when it comes to AI, one of the best places we have seen where you can apply AI is to the back office and internal processes, right? Where all the data crunching really happens. And luckily, in the report, which maybe I can share with you guys later, it says the 5% that succeed are the ones that apply it in those areas. They do small pilots and then they expand. They don't just start with so many things at once. So as you're listing out your processes, think about it. Is this an internal process or a customer-facing process? Another advantage of internal is it's easier for you to experiment with. When they fail, the costs, or you can minimize, or mitigate the risks of experimenting with that internally than with customer-facing ones. There are a few situations where a business put out a chatbot. I think one was either Chevrolet in the US, where someone came and negotiated to buy a truck, I think for $1. He was able to convince the chatbot, and he got the truck, for $1. Well, the chatbot said, yes, you can get it for $1, but I think he never got it. Another one was with Air Canada, where the chatbot convinced someone that they were entitled to a certain benefit for their ticket, which wasn't really so, and they went to court. And then Air Canada tried to say that the chatbot is responsible for the decision it made. And of course, the judge struck that down, that no, it's responsibility of the business. So I'm just trying to highlight that there's some risks associated with trying AI out with the customer-facing parts. Can I have the books? Okay. In the book, I show, there's a chart that has the AI adoption and how it just picks up after November 2022. And I overlay that, I'll compare it with PC adoption since the early 80s to now. And they have a similar trajectory on the chart. But later on in the book, I also show AI risks as well, which also follow a similar trajectory. So as AI is getting popular, so are the risks involved, which is not surprising, right? So it's something for you to really consider when you're trying to bring AI into your business, right? I suggest that you do internal facing processes first, and then you expand, mature into the customer ones, over time. So again, for each of the processes, the most painful one, you can rate it, right? Take the most painful one and then you bring it out in terms of the circuits framework. What are the steps involved? Are you creating data? Are you capturing data? Are you refining data? You line that out and then you can pinpoint where the problem is. And when you know where the problem is, you can tell, do I need an AI chatbot to solve that problem? Do I need a low code or the AI integration, or do I need to build an AI model from scratch? On the reverse side, you can see the pros and cons for each of these approaches. I don't know if you've tried it, but you can keep these sheets. Try it when you get back to your business. Think about it. There is an online version of it which you can download in case you need more. But yeah, so this is mostly what we have time for. I do a strategy workshop for business leaders, which is far more extended. It's a half-day workshop where we touch on these things, where we go into more detail and bring in specific use cases of those businesses, so they start to see how we can really integrate and filter into their own business. So if you need any of that, you have more links, around that to try.